the smallest amount of living tissue, which again for us is very important. Develop a strong form to reduce hazard potential in later life, and finally reduce the likelihood of injury to person and or damage to property. Now we've got a bit of a balancing act in this. You know, it's all well and good to go by the textbooks and the scientific approach to the amount of foliage that you should remove. There's certain constraints that we come across where sometimes we'll have to prune more than we should. But in the back of our mind, we're saying trying not to exceed a 25% of foliage in one growing season. We've got a 6-year plan where trees for 6 years are in the care of the tree establishment officer, and then they're given over to, it's a different sort of budget, it's given over to so he does the formative pruning, and then it's given over to the tree assessment officer, who does then the structural pruning. So any trees under 6 metres, we refer to it as, again as Greg said, structural pruning. Anything over 6 metres, it's, sorry, formative pruning. Anything over 6 metres, it's structural pruning. Excuse me. Also, ensure sufficient pruning is undertaken to limit the need for having to go back in between those year 2 and year 4. Again, that balancing act of you know, thinking I'm going to be the person, well, you're hoping you're the contractor who's going back to that tree, that you know, I'll take a little bit off because I know next year or in 2 years time that you know, that co-dominant that is subordinated, that's going to come off completely. So keep that in mind, although it's not always, you know, people, arborists don't really have that luxury a lot of the time when they're going back to the same tree. But think about it, if you do learn from this and you do increase your skills, councils like ourselves will want that high-end work, and we're prepared to pay for it as well. So, you know, this is the ball rolling. This is us asking for quality workers, good arborists who know how to prune, and then, you know, obviously come in and you can prune for us. So it's a win-win situation. Which branches to prune? The classics: dead, broken, split, dying, diseased, duplicating and rubbing branches. Also co-dominant stems in those ex-current trees. And let's talk a little bit about those ex-current trees. Actually, can somebody just tell me the difference between an ex-current and a decurrent tree?
I thought you'd know, right?
I do, but it's a stupid question. You know, I'm leading the witness here. Come on. Anybody?
Ex-current is a single apical leader,
yep,
like a Christmas tree.
Sure.
And a decurrent has a broadly spreading crown.
Fair, that's spot on. So ex-current would be like a spruce, decurrent, Melia, Acer. You get the picture. So first of all, with the ex-current tree, you need to locate the best stem to develop that leader, and that's usually in the centre of the canopy, but not always. Sometimes you might want to prune if there's two stems that you want to prune and both are equal candidates. You might want to prune the one that's closest to the road, so therefore the tree grows away from the incoming traffic, and later on down the track you're not having to crown lift as much for vehicle access. So just have a think about those sort of things. Locate the stems and branches that are competing as a leader. As I said, there's two there usually. Pick the one that you think is the most suitable, and obviously the one that has the death sentence. Subordinate or remove these stems and branches to allow the leader to dominate. And again, at Hume we have the luxury where the contractor or the staff member are going to come back, and they have that in their mind that I can take this down, I can take 50% off this co-dominant stem, because in 2 years time I'm going to come back and remove the rest of it. Again, with that 25% in the back of your head, you know, you want to try and minimize it. Now we have we also have a little policy here where when we're forming pruning a tree like this, we start at the apex and work our way down, because we believe that this is arguable, the least important thing is the crown lifting. When I first came here, you know, 15 years ago, Australians were mad for it. I'm sure it happens in other cultures as well. You just got to lift everything up, lift it. sometimes it just doesn't need to be lifted. There's benefits to keeping low branches down on the lower part of the stem. You know, that could increase taper. Again, it could dissuade people with whippersnippers from damaging the main trunk. So again, think about it. Don't think about the tree then and there. Think about the future of it and how it's going to look in 5 years or 10 years time. And on that subject of crown lifting, prune for line of sight issues. So whether it's vehicles reversing out or people, you know, wanting to cross at a pedestrian crossing, make sure that you know, that people's safety is at the forefront. It's not always essential. Now, this is a little secret that hopefully nobody goes back to Vic Roads and tells them, but it's not always essential to prune to mandated vehicular traffic clearances. If you can get away with it, do it. You know, a lot of times, you know, the tree is, I think, is it 3 meters for Vic Roads branches? Yeah, it has to be. You have to prune to 3 meters. A lot of the times we won't prune it unless we're told to do it. So at the last minute we'll do it because we're told to do it. So just think about that. You don't necessarily always have to do it. Consider the traffic flow. If it's a dead-end court, would you bother? You know what I mean? People are reversing out. It's not necessarily a line of sight issue if there's only 5 houses in the close. So think about that, where the tree is. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, lower branches on young trees increase taper, reducing the risk of stem failure.
Right, just one thing, with the whether they're X-current or D-current, most street trees people are aspiring to an X-current form, so you can pretty much assume that even if the tree is D-current, you want it as an X-current as a street tree. You certainly don't want that in other contexts, and eventually you're going to lose the fight because a D-current tree will become a D-current tree, but it'd probably happen after it's you know, that 5 or 6 metres high. That's the only comment I would make. Everything else I think is really spot on.
Fair enough. So let's get stuck in, eh?
Yep. Well, which one are you going to do? There's a fair bit of work that could be done on these casuarinas.
Sure.
And everyone's noticed the posts, I know. You could just take that off, and there's quite a number of them. The other thing you could do would be just to take this one off, or this one off, whichever one you want. And at the moment I'd be leaning towards that one. My suspicion is that Ronan, City of Hume, will probably want to take this one off and bring this one back if he's going up from the top. And one of the things that I really like is I love the idea that you can take a co-dominant stem and turn it into a branch. You know, all you got to do is take off the upper parts, and as soon as it starts to put on its tissue in the growing season earlier than the trunk, it'll go from being a co-dominant stem to a branch. Similarly, with an epicormic shoot, if you want to, you can train an epicormic shoot, if you can manage it, so that it becomes a branch rather than an epicormic shoot. So my suspicion is this one's got to come off for sure, and then Ronan probably wants to bring this one back a bit and probably wants to leave that one because it's on the side that he would prefer, the north side. That's the way I'd go for it, at least to start with.
Yep. But also, after that there, there's a bit of congestion around here, we'll thin some of those out. So again, back to the little cheat sheet you have. If you look up at the top, there's no real faults. Again, just maybe a little bit of congestion up there, but I think that's typical of the species.
So just to give you an idea, and I'm probably not supposed to be on there, I'd take this one off here, because then it's going to reduce this as a competitor, and I'd take this one off straight away. They'd be my 2 starting points.
Alright, that's good. Pressure. Also, anything over 2 meters, because we've got bigger ladders than this, we'll use a harness and actually attach ourselves into with 2 points to the tree, so that you know, safety is maintained.
High silicon in those.
Yeah, go up.
Not through bar.
Again, that sharp saw is essential. We also try and pride ourselves in stressing to staff and contractors to reduce the amount of overcuts. So you know those little nicks when you sort of maybe go a bit too far and you cut into here? You know, aesthetically it's not the best, and obviously it's just another wound for the tree to cope with. So there's another one there.
Just as a matter of interest, folks, Alex Shigo in his books reckons that you start your use of the collars and BBRs at anything above 25 millimetres or an inch, okay, in size. In some of his work he actually suggested 2 inches. Okay, so he's arguing that if you've got a branch smaller than 2 inches, you don't really have to worry about collars and BBRs. What we found, we did a lot of cuts in the Burnley field station, and we reckon 20 mils. So anything above 20 mils, try and find your collars and use your BBRs. Under 20 mils doesn't really matter. That's just...
Again, if you're using this little fella, there's less a chance of those overcuts occurring. More of a precision instrument than the big 330. I think it's called the Zubat. Again, reducing the amount of overcut. If you just want to come in a bit closer, just to have a look at that there. I mean, even to feel how smooth it is. It's a great piece of kit, this thing. Should get sponsored by them. Smooth, isn't it? Right, Greg, we talked about reducing this one, isn't that right?
No, the higher one.
What's that?
The one higher up. Just reach up. Next, that one.
Yes.
That's
so take that down.
Yep. And then I'd probably leave her, I think.
Yep.
See how she goes.
And honestly, really, all you need is those secateurs and this little fella, the pocket boy. Excuse me. And then we'll proceed to remove those duplicating branches, those rubbing branches, all the congestion in here, and that's really about it. Okay, there's another rubbing.
How much foliage can you take off? Rowan's talking about 20%, but I've said on young trees that are really vigorous, they've got a lot of dynamic mass growing. Sometimes when you go and take a codominant limb out, you'll take up to 50% of the canopy.
With codominant stems and young trees, I think you can take off virtually that 50%. Now you know that you're going to put the tree back, and you will put it back, but I think you get away with it, and I think you've got to be practical here. But someone's not going to allow you to come back, you know, in every 6 months or 12 months to multiple cut. But I do like the idea of 25% or 20% where possible.
That's almost, the 25% is almost a figure to keep people honest, if you know what I mean. So, you know, they'll feel guilty if they took 50% out, but you know, that 25% warning, you know, it's done its job. They're always worried that, you know, you may take 50% out of, you know, a handful of trees, but that, you know, they will be the exception, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. But also remember, you can take a codominant stem sometimes. You don't have to take the whole branch off. You may decide that you want that codominant stem to become a branch, and as soon as you reduce it, there's every chance it will do it. Many of you, if you live on this side of the town, I remember when I was younger, some of the old Italian and Greek folks, when they were gardening, they'd have codominant stems, and you'd go out one day and you'd see the branch with 6 bricks on it. They'd hung 6 bricks from the branch, and what they were doing was they were pulling it over. Now, as soon as they pull it over, you change the auxins in that branch, and instead of being a codominant stem, it will rapidly become a branch. Problem is you can't do that with street trees, you know, you can't wander on, oh look, 7 bricks hanging from the tree. But it works really quite well. And the other thing you can do is if you've got a codominant stem and you want to turn it into a branch, always prune to a bud that's facing out, let that shoot, and then if you haven't got the angle then, prune it again to a bud that's facing out, and you'll gradually arc the branch around just by picking the outward facing bud every time. So a lot of street trees you're not going to have that money to spend to do that sort of work, but in some instances you will. It's amazing what you can do if you've got a bit of time.
Yeah. Speaking of time, we might leave Ronan to his masterpiece, and those of us who want to undertake some formative pruning on a tree, we walk ourselves down along this way, find your tree. By the time you've done yours to the best of your ability,
about that, you can't judge formative pruning on the day you do the pruning. Some of you may think that you're going to cut a bit out and the locals are going to come out and say, oh, what have you done, and it looks terrible. You just tough it out. What you really do, because what you're doing is you're giving a good structure and you're thinking about what the tree is going to look like in 2, 5, 10, 20 years time. You're not interested in an instant result. Okay, and it's amazing how things work. You know that tree is going to grow over, it's going to straighten up. Think about when you're pruning off, which direction you're pruning from. So you know that if you've got a codominant stem and you've got one on the north and one on the south, it's much easier to make the one on the south into a branch because it'll be shaded by the one on the north. Similarly, if you've got a tree like this one, the first one, where you had a bulk of the canopy facing to the west, you can easily shade out the branch on the east. So think about the orientation and what you're looking to achieve. I think, I'm going to say that everyone did a good job. Where's Pat? Everyone did a good job. I was impressed, Pat, with the speed that you took to it. No mucking around, made the decision, into it, and I was a bit curious how this one was going to come up, and I reckon that's another one of those trees, instant improvement, don't you think? Just looks right now, it looks balanced, it's going to grow well. You have taken a bit of the foliage off, but it'll sort of shoot and it'll fill in the canopy in no time at all. So all of these trees are going to be better for the formative pruning that you've done today, and I would recommend that you come back here and have a look. 2 years and 5 years, well worth doing.